Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning, all. Welcome. We'll be starting in just a moment. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning and welcome to the VIEDA Wednesday webinars. My name is Chanel Peterson. I'm the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority's Managing Director for Marketing and Vision 2040. So today's webinar, we'll be having and discussing the Economic Aid Act Overview and PPP Relaunch. So our partners for this webinar this week is the Small Business Administration, and we are so pleased to have with us our main speaker, Mr. Wayne Huddleston. Oops, there you go. Mr. Wayne Huddleston, the Senior Area Manager for the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico Division. And we did skip one slide, so I would like to make mention how to participate throughout this webinar. So at any point, if you'd like to ask a question, you can always raise your hand, but we're going to give plenty of time at the end to ask as many questions as you can possibly have. So by all means, if you'd also like to put in those questions in the chat at any time, you can do that as well. And for those who are viewing on Facebook this morning, please feel free to place your comments in the comment section. We'll have someone checking in there. So without further ado, I would like to pass this over to Mr. Wayne Huddleston. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chanel, for the introduction. And thank you to the whole team at VIEDA for continuing to host these presentations as we try to get the word out on PPP, EIDL, and other programs to help small businesses. There are deadlines with these, so we certainly want to make sure everybody gets the word, and we really appreciate your help. Let's see, so how should I do this? Chanel, should I share my screen or?
Yep, so you can go ahead and share your screen now.
Okay, let me do that. Let me get the, hold on just 1 second. Sorry for the delay here. Let me get the presentation up and going, okay.
And so I know this is definitely a question often asked. Will this presentation be available after today? And the answer is yes. You can find the recordings of both the Zoom webinar as well as the Facebook live stream on our website at www.usvieda.org/webinars. And we'll be placing that in the chat as well as repeating that towards the end. Again, we do ask that everyone place your mics on mute. Feel free to turn your cameras on at any point. And again, if you do have a question or comment, you can always raise your hand. And as always, place any comments or questions in the chat.
Okay, just to ensure, can you see the first screen or the first slide?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I'm just gonna dive right into it. Those of you who have been on these webinars in the past when we presented will remember that I'll present about 35 minutes worth of content to give you an overview of the programs that we're talking about at the time, and then allow plenty of opportunities at the end to answer any questions you have. And you can answer, of course, you can always chat them in the chat as we go, and then we'll get to those at the end as well, or you can unmute yourself. So just as a short disclaimer, as we begin this presentation, I'm going to be covering the Economic Aid Act, and specifically the SBA portions of the Economic Aid Act as they apply to small businesses. Our programs are the bigger ones that are in there. There are other smaller programs to help educational institutions and other things, but I will not be covering all those. I'm just focusing on the tools to help small businesses. As I go through it, there's a lot of information to share. I'm just gonna be providing a short overview. Sometimes, however, and this is where disclaimer comes in, I will get questions that are very specific or go into a more complicated detail. I will answer those questions the best I can and the way I understood the reading of the Economic Aid Act. However, if by chance, and I don't think it would happen, but if by chance I provided information that was not the same that was in the Economic Aid Act, the Economic Aid Act always takes precedence. I cannot overrule what Congress has authorized in the act, and it is hundreds of pages long. So I don't necessarily have all of it committed to memory. I pretty much will be able to answer any question you have, but just in case that happens, know that the act itself has priority there and has precedent over me. So over the agenda, we're going to just discuss briefly where we are with the rollout of our major programs. I'm going to talk about four of them, and I'm going to be focusing more on two of them, of those four. There'll be PPP EIDL. I'm going to be talking about something called EIDL Advance and Venue Operators Grant. And then I'm going to talk about additional resources, and then we'll open it up to questions afterwards. So just as an overview in the beginning here, the Congress had intended this round of COVID-19 economic aid to help the hardest hit businesses that are out there. There were some concerns in the first round of PPP and economic injury disaster loans that it had not fully served all segments of the population, women, minorities, and veterans. And so we're making a renewed effort to make sure we are hitting all underserved communities across the country. Here in the Virgin Islands, honestly, we are doing a fantastic job. When you look at the numbers compared to our reach here in the Virgin Islands, compared to the average across the country and average in other states, we are by far having much more reach and more businesses here are taking advantage of the program. However, there's always more we can do. And certainly the one thing I worry about and do not want to happen is that when summer comes around and these programs are gone, I would hate to think that there's a business owner out there that really needed these tools to get through a rough patch and didn't know about them. So we're trying very hard to make sure we reach everyone. And certainly if you know of people out there who have not taken advantage of this program and should, please help us by spreading the word, because there is a limited time frame on when this will be available. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about several programs or 4 programs in specific. I'm going to spend more time on the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, but I am going to provide an overview of what debt relief on current SBA loans are. And I'm going to talk about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. But I'm not going to spend as much time on those because they don't affect as many people. We don't typically, or I typically in this area, do not get many questions on those, and they're pretty straightforward. So first, I'm going to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program and give you the top takeaways. So in this new round of funding, those of you may remember it from the past, it ended in August. And then there was nothing until Congress finally came together and decided to put together another economic aid package, which was approved in December. But that did allow time to make some changes and improvements to the program. So a few of those are listed here. One is it expands eligibility and how funds can be used. It doesn't still cover every single business out there, but it covers the vast majority. And there are a few additional businesses that are now eligible that were not in the past. A borrower can now select a covered period to be anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks. Before they were stuck with either 8 or 24, but now it can be anywhere in between. Most importantly for most borrowers, the important provision is that this new round offers an opportunity to get a second draw on the PPP loan. So those of you who received it the first time, but now months have passed and that money is gone and you're still suffering from the effects of the pandemic, now have an opportunity to receive a second draw. It does allow, excuse me, for deduction of expenses covered on federal taxes. There is a simplified forgiveness form this time. The simplified forgiveness form last time was available to businesses who took up to $50,000. That has been expanded to businesses that have taken up to $150,000. And for businesses that did receive an economic injury disaster loan, while there was an advance available and you received an advance, those of you who received that and also received the PPP loan may recall that as you apply for forgiveness, that advance was taken out. That is no longer the case. those advances will not be taken out should you receive an advance from the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program as well. So first thing I'm going to talk about, what is a first draw PPP loan? And that is for applicants that did not receive a PPP loan prior to August 9th of 2020. So this would be your first time receiving it. This new eligibility for those loans includes those new entities that are now eligible, which I'll cover in a little bit. It does also expand some eligible expenses that are allowable under the program. So you may remember, if you applied before or if you're applying now, there is a threshold on the minimum amount that must be spent on payroll for this loan. As the title implies, the primary purpose of this loan is to provide payroll and paychecks to your employees. I highly encourage everyone who receives a PPP loan to expend 100% of those funds on payroll in order to ease the forgiveness process. However, if a business is unable to expend 100% of the funds during that covered period, the borrower is allowed to spend some of those funds on eligible expenses. In the past, those were things such as utilities, rent, mortgage interest, and very little beyond that. That has since been expanded to include expenses you may have incurred due to the pandemic, such as purchasing protective personal protective equipment for your employees, face masks, gloves, what have you, to operate the business. If you had to incur expenses to purchase new technology to take your business online, those could be covered. But that's about it. But those additional expenses are now eligible. You can spend up to 40% of your PPP loan on those additional expenses outside of payroll. However, again, I encourage you, if you can spend it all on payroll, do it that way. It makes the forgiveness process a lot more simple. It takes a lot of questioning out of whether this would be fully forgiven, but you do have the eligibility to spend up to 40% on other expenses if needed. Borrowers can set the covered period to be anywhere between 8 to 24 weeks. And that covered period, to define it a little bit better, the covered period is the period of time you have to spend those funds that you receive. So that starts from the time that a business received those funds. Some businesses can say, I can spend all that down on payroll and other expenses within 8 weeks, and then they can turn around and start their forgiveness process. Some need a little bit more time, and that can go all the way up to 24 weeks. But that is the window to spend your PPP funds prior to submitting for forgiveness. Some borrowers in the first round may request an increase to their original PPP loan amount. Must have been in business prior to February 15th. This loan program is not intended to assist people in starting a new business and going in a new venture during the pandemic. It is to help businesses who are suffering and have experienced a significant economic burden due to the pandemic get through a rough patch. So your business must have been established prior to by February 15th. And then finally, this is very important now, the deadline on this is March 31st or until congressional appropriations are exhausted. I do not anticipate that appropriations will be exhausted before March 31st. However, I certainly also encourage you not to wait till the last moment. You do not want to wait until the last few days to try to get your application in. This is run by lenders and they will be experiencing a high volume of applicants at the time. And you certainly don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that your application has plenty of time to be reviewed and be considered before that deadline. So first draw loan eligibility, as I mentioned before, there were new businesses that were eligible under the CARES Act, not under the CARES Act, under the Economic Aid Act. Those include housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations, certain 501c6 organizations, such as the Chamber of Commerce, and some eligible news organizations. All other businesses that were eligible under the previous round of PPP funding are still eligible in this time. So if you did not apply for one reason or another during that first round, this is your second opportunity to apply. I do not anticipate there will be many opportunities after this, if any. So I would encourage you, highly encourage you to take advantage of the program and make an application if you never did during the first round. So what is a second draw PPP loan? A second draw simply is for people who have taken out a loan in the first round and now wish to receive more funds so they can get more funding again, because I know it has been months since that first round happened. There are some additional provisions under the Economic Aid Act if you're getting a second draw loan. It is not as simple, but it is still relatively simple. Of course, you must be a small business. You must have 300 employees or less. So in the past, we define small businesses as it's defined in our size standards for SBA. And in some instances, businesses can have 500 or more employees. That has since been changed. It is now only businesses that have 300 or less. Must also show that you suffered a 25% reduction in gross receipts. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. For most borrowers, the maximum loan amount for the second draw will be the same as it was for the first draw, which is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs. The max is up to 2 million on this round. You may remember before that max was up to 10 million. That has been reduced. It's now 2 million, but the formula is the same, 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, 2019 or 2020 payroll costs. An additional provision in this program was to allow for more funds for businesses that are in the, what we call North American Industry Classification System 72 code. So just to put it very simply, that code applies to all accommodation and food services industry. So if you are a restaurant, if you're a supplier of food or food services to a restaurant, more than likely you fall under that code. That allows you to receive a higher amount under the second draw, 3.5 times your average monthly payroll. That is a significant increase, but Congress felt that that was important to provide that additional amount to some of the hardest hit businesses, which were the food services sector. Again, that cap is still at $2 million. The second draw PPP loan applicants must submit information on SBA Form 2483 SD when applying to their lender. Again, your lender should be able to provide that directly to you. If not, you can get that application on our site, but they will be managing the application process. Okay, loan eligibility. To receive a second draw, you must have already received a first draw PPP loan, and the covered periods cannot overlap. So if you are still in a covered period, I don't think some covered periods will go for a while into this period. I think until the beginning of March is the longest a covered period could possibly be, but they cannot overlap. You can only have one at a time. You must also show that a business has used the first draw PPP loan amount or will use the first draw amount only for the eligible expenses before the second draw PPP loan is dispersed. That does not necessarily mean that you must have received forgiveness from SBA to show that you did comply and that loan is forgiven. That forgiveness process can be ongoing, but you must show as you apply for that second loan and must attest that you did use it for the purposes it was intended, and you are eligible to receive that second loan. And then of course you must show that you don't have 300 employees or more. And you must demonstrate a 25% reduction in gross receipts, as I mentioned earlier. This must be for comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So you would review your 2019 quarters, look at your payroll, review your 2020 quarters, look at the payroll, and do that comparison. You can only use the same quarters in each year. So if you are using your second quarter of 2019 to show what your payroll was then, you can only compare that to your second quarter of 2020 as you make your application for the second draw. So here's the process in a nutshell. First, you find a PPP lender. Here on this slide, we give some resources such as Lender Match, which is a tool on our website to connect potential borrowers with lenders. We also have other resources there. However, I highly encourage you to use local lenders. There are 5 local lenders right now that are currently processing both first and second PPP loan applications. Those are Banco Popular, First Bank, Oriental, Merchants Bank, and Bank of St. Croix. All have been doing a very good job of processing those loans and getting them done. They are pushing them through, and I'm watching the numbers come through. I know they're processing them into the nights and on weekends sometimes. So highly encourage you, if you already have a relationship with a local lender, you should use a local lender because they understand your finances, especially if you already received the PPP loan originally with a local lender. You should go to that same lender to get your second draw. However, you are not confined to the lenders here in the territory. There are many lenders, thousands actually, throughout the country who are processing PPP loans. If you have an existing relationship with a lender stateside, especially if it's for your business account, you can use them. All the large major banks are SBA guaranteed lenders. There are also what we call fintech lenders that are primarily online. They will process PPP loans as well. You can get a full list of lenders on our site. We provide reports on lenders who are processing PPP loans. But again, I highly encourage you to use the local lenders just to make the process simpler, but you can use any one of a number of loans out there, anywhere stateside as well. You will complete your application with your lender, not SBA, even though they will give you some SBA forms. You will not submit those to us. You will submit those all through your lender. They will ask you for a supporting documentation, which may be proof of your payroll, a few other documentations, and then they will submit that to SBA. We will very quickly turn around a decision on whether that loan is approved and receives that guarantee to the lender. Once they receive that guarantee from us, they have, I believe it's within 5 days, they must deposit that money into your account. They have that loan number, and that is essentially a loan. Then you use those funds as the loan was intended during your covered period. And then afterwards, you would apply for forgiveness after the process is over. But again, you would do that through your lender. This is a loan. It is not a grant. So if for some reason a loan is not forgiven, then whatever is left, whether it's all of the loan or any portion of the loan, that is something that you will have to pay back. That has a fixed interest rate of 1%. That is non-compounding and non-adjustable. There's no requirement for collateral or personal guarantees on these loans. There are no fees or prepayment penalties. It has a 5-year maturity. For some loans, the original round of funding for PPP, for loans that were issued prior to June 5th, they were 2-year terms. However, you can extend that to 5 years if you wish. If you received that loan, you didn't get it forgiven, and you want more than 2 years to pay it back, then you can work that out with your lender to extend that term to 5 years. But the payments start once the borrower knows how much of the PPP loan will be forgiven or not be forgiven. The lender will notify you. That forgiveness process takes some time. It's typically 10 months after the end of the covered period is when that first payment will be due. So the loan forgiveness process, I want to talk a little bit about that, just because that's the important piece of PPP. Forgiveness is done through your lender. So when you receive those funds, once you feel you're at the point anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks that you have spent down those funds and you can show it through your payroll expenses, then you should submit your lender forgiveness application form through your lender. They have time to review that form, and then they will submit that to SBA, and then SBA will render that forgiveness decision. Once we render that forgiveness decision to your lender, they must notify you in writing within 5 days of that forgiveness decision. In the vast majority of cases, they are 100% forgiven. There are cases where they are not, but that is typically because the borrower did not submit the proper documentation, did not spend the funds in the right way, or cannot prove it, which again is why I highly encourage you, when you receive those funds, to spend 100% of it on payroll and make that forgiveness process as easy as possible. Idle advances are no longer deducted from the PPP forgiveness payment. So if you received an idle advance in the past, you no longer need to worry about that. Expenses paid with the PPP loans funds are tax deductible. You can consult with your IRS if you want more details on that, but if you have an accountant, they should be aware of that as well. Expended forgiveness expenses are permissible. Those are what I spoke of earlier. Outside of payroll, if you cannot spend it all on payroll and need to spend some of it on other expenses such as utilities, you can also spend them now on additional expenses such as PPP equipment and other technology upgrades that were required due to pandemic. And then, as I mentioned before, there was a new simplified application form for loans under $150,000. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk about our economic injury disaster loan. That's the other big program that is approved under the Economic Aid Act. So if you remember this program before, there was an approval to provide loans of up to $150,000. These are not forgivable loans, but these have excellent terms for businesses that are suffering under the pandemic. The allowable expenditures on these are expanded beyond just payroll. They can be used for working capital and normal operating expenses, such as continuation of healthcare benefits, rent, utilities, fixed debt payments, and so forth. Previously, that deadline was December 31st of 2020. And just days before that deadline, Congress extended that another year. So if you have not applied for an economic injury disaster loan, you still have the rest of this year to decide whether you want to apply for those funds. The terms are 3.75% for business, 2.75% for nonprofits, and they have a 30-year term. There is no prepayment penalty on this, and loans over $25,000 secured by UCC filing. So in other words, you do not have to submit collateral under $25,000. I'm sorry, you don't have to submit collateral for those over $25,000, and now that they're secured by UCC filing. That is something new under the AID Act. What we highly suggest is if you have not received an economic injury disaster loan yet, and you are a business owner, and you're not, and I understand a lot of business owners do not wish to take on debt if they can avoid it. That is completely understandable. However, if you're uncertain about how difficult the effects of the pandemic will be, we don't know how long this will last. I think we're nearing the light at the end of the tunnel, but we still have months to go. And there could be additional negative effects to business owners. So I have been suggesting, if you think there's even a slight possibility that you might need an economic injury disaster loan at some point, I would go ahead and apply now. You can apply simply directly through our website. If you secure that approval, you can get those funds, and I highly encourage you to put it in a separate bank account. A separate bank account so that you can review those funds and have them just sitting there. If you don't need them and 6, 7, 9 months down the line, you realize I am not ever going to need these funds and I do not wish to carry the debt, even if the terms are really low, you can just pay that money back to SBA. And the only cost to do so is the small amount of interest that accrued during those months. And for many people, that is well worth the price of having that option to be able to get into those funds. But if you do need those funds and you already have them sitting in your account, that is perfect. And then you can just manage that out of that one account. And then if you want to pay back 80% of it or 50% of it, you can do that as well. But you certainly don't want to get to the point where you need those funds and then you're beginning that application process. So I highly encourage you to start early. Even if you think you might need it, you can always pay that back without penalty. So I'm going to talk a bit about something called the Targeted Idle Advance, which was a big amendment during the Economic Aid Act. So those of you who may remember early on in the pandemic, when the EIDL program was approved, there was an opportunity to receive an advance on those funds up to $10,000. Many businesses were able to receive those. However, funds ran out. Congress only approved, I believe it was $2 billion for that, and then those funds ran out. And any applicant who received an economic injury disaster loan later to that date did not have an opportunity to receive an advance. So Congress has provided additional funding for that program, allowing business owners who either did not receive the full amount of the advance or did not have an opportunity to receive the advance at all to receive that going forward. SBA is prioritizing low-income communities and communities that suffered greater than the 30% economic loss, and businesses that have 300 or fewer employees in that. You do not need to do anything to receive that advance. SBA is working through all the applicants and applications that were approved previously for EIDL and did not receive an advance, and they are making that assessment of who is eligible to receive that targeted advance. If you are eligible, you will receive an email from SBA with additional documentation that will be required to submit before that approval for that advance is provided. Some examples of the documentation required will be a 2019 federal tax return, your EIN, and it should be exactly as it was on your original EIDL application, monthly ghost receipts for 19, 20, and what you have completed so far in 21. You must confirm that the information is still accurate on the previous loan application, and you must submit forms such as a 4506T to obtain tax transcripts. There's only one submission for each targeted EIDL advance. You must carefully review your bank account information, ensure that everything is 100% correct, because SBA will not be able to make reconsiderations. And I want to emphasize that. SBA will not reconsider your loan application for a targeted EIDL advance. So in the past, applicants for economic injury disaster loan had an opportunity to have their loan reconsidered if there was a simple clerical error. So perhaps someone missed one digit on their bank account information, or perhaps someone did not submit the correct documentation in some way and were able to get a reconsideration later. That is not going to be possible this time. So SBA encourages you to make sure that if you do receive that email and you do have an opportunity to apply for the targeted advance, you want to make triple sure that everything you're submitting is 100% correct, because once that decision is made, there is not an opportunity to go back and have it reconsidered with additional applications and reconsiderations during that time. If you have any questions on that program, I suggest you email targetadvance@sba.gov. Highly encourage you not to email that account if you have not already been targeted to possibly receive an EIDL advance. But if you have been and you have some questions on it, this is the email that you can send a message to get more information. So now I'm going to touch briefly on a couple of other programs that were approved under the Economic Aid Act. One is the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. This is a grant. This is free money. This is not a loan or even a forgivable loan. This is just money that you do not have to pay back. These are restricted to live venue operators, theater producers, live performing arts, talent representatives. We don't have a ton of those business entities here in the Virgin Islands, which is why I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but we do have a few. So if you fall into that category and wish to receive more information, please visit our website. We have a full application, frequently asked questions documents. However, you should know that you will need to be registered in sam.gov in order to apply. SAM stands for the System for Award Management. That is the federal government's database of entities that are eligible to receive funds from the federal government. So no federal grant is eligible to be given from the federal agency to a business or nonprofit without being registered in SAM. So if you are one of these eligible entities, you want to go right now, make sure you are registered in SAM. And if you are, you want to go to our site and get more information on how to apply going forward. This is a short kind of grid which shows how these programs interact, especially for the few businesses that will be applying for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. There are some conditions. So for instance, you are not eligible to apply for a PPP loan if you are receiving a Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. That criterion is significant, and you're not allowed to double dip in a way and receive a grant and also receive a forgivable loan. That grant is intended to cover those purposes that the PPP loan was meant for. A big takeaway from this for those of you who are not venue operators or talent agents is to know that you can apply for both a PPP loan and a economic injury disaster loan. But they cannot be used for the same purposes and costs. So if you are using your PPP loan to cover payroll, which you should not document your expenses under the economic injury disaster loan as the same expenses that you use for a PPP loan. They must be for different things. So you can use the economic injury disaster loan for payroll, but I would certainly not use it for the same portion of payroll that you intend to apply for forgiveness under PPP. You can also use the economic injury disaster loan to cover all sorts of other expenses that we discussed earlier. One thing I did not mention, but I do want to mention it here, as in the past, I mentioned the eligible expenses for an economic injury disaster loan. You can pay down your regular fixed monthly payments, but a frequent question that comes up is, can you pay off a previously existing loan that was at a higher interest rate? And that is not allowable. The purpose of the economic injury disaster loan is to help in times of disaster, not refinance under better terms loans you already had, or expand your business or purchase new equipment or a new building and so forth. That is not the purpose of these loans. They are to help you get by in a pinch. So be sure not to use those funds to apply or pay off previously existing debt. The last program I'd like to talk about is the Loan Debt Relief Program for business owners that have an existing SBA-backed loan. That would be with a local, well, it could be with a local lender or it could be a lender anywhere. But if it is an SBA loan, typically it's a 7A loan or a 504 loan or a micro loan. And if you have one of those loans, you'll be familiar with the term 7A or 504. SBA will make the payments on those loans for you for a limited window. So you may remember in the past, under the CARES Act, SBA provided up to 3 months worth of payments for SBA 7A loans that were paid directly to the lender. And you did not have to do anything. The time period expired under the previous act, and under this new act, that was renewed. There are some additional conditions. So not every single business that has an SBA-backed loan will qualify for that debt relief, but the vast majority will. You do not need to apply for this. SBA is informing lenders directly of which loans are eligible and will begin making those payments on your behalf to those lenders. And your lender will notify you that SBA is making those payments for you. If you'd like more information on that program, you can get it at sba.gov. Debt relief, you can get more information on it there. And if you have any questions about it, if you have an SBA-backed loan and you have not received any notice from your lender that SBA is making those payments, you should reach out to that lender to gather confirmation going forward. So key takeaways, we talked about the Paycheck Protection Program. The big thing I want to emphasize there is that deadline is March 31st, and you do not want to wait until the end. You want to start talking to your lender now, pull together necessary documentation, and submit that loan application as quickly as possible. There is debt relief, which I just spoke about. If you have not heard about that and you already have an existing loan, we're not talking about disaster loans. We're talking about 7A loans. You want to reach out to your lender to ensure that you qualify. We also talked about economic injury disaster loans. The important note about that is you can only have one per disaster, but you have the rest of this year to apply. However, I highly encourage you to apply if you think there's even a possibility you might be able to use those funds. And then there's the Shuttered Venue Grant Operators. Shuttered Venue Operators Grant available, and there's a lot more information about that on our site. I didn't go into great detail on it here. So finally, we want to leave you with some local resources. SBA has official resource partners that operate here in the territory as well. These are entities that receive SBA funding, and their primary purpose is to help small business owners not only with SBA resources and programs, but any little aspect of their business. And there are two. One is SCORE. SCORE, you can get more information on them at score.org. They are a collection of mentors and coaches and volunteers from all across the country, and there are thousands and thousands of them. The vast majority of SCORE volunteers are previous business owners who have a great deal of expertise in their field. They have also received additional training on how to be a proper coach and mentor and share information from SCORE. If you would like to be connected with a coach or mentor, visit score.org/USVI branch. You can submit information to request a mentor. SCORE is able to leverage mentors. There are a few here in the territory, but there are many thousands across the country. The SCORE branch here has a close tie with the branch in Florida. They have a great deal of expertise. Where often that match makes the best sense is if you are in a particular industry and you would like just some coaching from someone who is not a competitor of yours, but can help you provide their experience and their perspective on how to succeed or address challenging issues. Those coaches can help with that. They typically, when you request a mentor, they'll ask your industry, and they'll try to find a mentor who's knowledgeable of that industry to meet with you. And you can meet as much as you want. Typically, they make that match. You and your mentor or coach select the time to have a Zoom call or some other FaceTime, whatever it is that y'all want to do. And you begin that dialogue and talk through things. They also have a great deal of templates and resources on their website. If you want a business plan template, if you want a financial statement template, they have a ton of great ones on their website. So highly encourage you to visit score.org and gather information from them. Here in the territory, we have business advisors that live here in the territory, understand the Virgin Islands market and unique challenges here in the Virgin Islands, and are highly trained to provide business advisory services to small business owners here in the territory. That is at the SBDC. There are offices on St. Thomas and also on St. Croix. You can request an in-person meeting with them. I believe they're doing a lot of their meetings right now still virtually, but when this pandemic eases, they will return to in-person assessments. They can help business owners with a wide variety of everything from, I'm in the beginning, I don't know how to develop my business plan, I need some guidance, I need some extra eyes on this to help vet this idea if it's going to be financially feasible or if it makes sense, to more complex issues such as growing your business to a larger number of employees and the issues that are working with that, or expanding down island, or securing a much larger loan. If you need to get a loan up into millions of dollars, SBDC staff are very well versed on how to assist businesses in reaching those goals. Neither one of these entities will do the work for you. None of them will write your business plan for you. None of them are going to do the application for you with a lender, but they will help you through that process to help you be successful. Highly encourage you to take advantage of both of those resources available here in the territory. And then outside of that, we also have plenty of resources always up on our website. You can get a subscription to our e-newsletter if you want updates at your email, sba.gov/updates. We also have a Twitter account, both a national Twitter account and a local Twitter account, which is run through Puerto Rico. Then, of course, you can always reach out to me. Wayne.Huddleston, SBA.gov is the best way to reach out to me. My cell phone number is provided there. But as you can tell from the ringing earlier in the presentation, I can't always answer my cell phone. And if you provide your email and explain what's going on there, it also makes it a little bit easier for me to bring in an additional resource if needed, if I have your email. So highly encourage you to make use of that. If there's anything I can help with regarding SBA programs, I'm happy to help. So with that, I'll stop talking and open it up to questions from here.
Thank you so much, Wayne. We have quite a few that's coming in through the chat.
Great.
And I know that you did mention this at some point. So clearly, you know, some folks may need some more guidance on the logistics, but someone has asked, how exactly do they apply or submit their forgiveness application? Is it electronically? Is it via mail?
It depends on the lender. So the vast majority of lenders have developed an online process to apply through their bank online. Some lenders, you know, I know some are saying, fill out this form, submit it in paper to us, or email your documents to us. But the vast majority, the application form is done through the lender, through their web portal that they have set up for it.
Thank you. So contact your lender for those details. Someone else really more so has a comment. Perhaps you have some feedback on it. And their statement is, my company was still in hurricane recovery mode, and the company's income was about 80 to 85% below normal. In 2020, our income increased, but there were quarters that our income did drop 65 to 70% below normal, but it still was not lower than 2019. Apparently, this disqualifies their company from getting the loan. In the VI, many businesses were still recovering in 2019, so the comparison can still be challenging.
Yes, and that's tough. And unfortunately, there's very little can be done with that. If you were doing better in 2020 than you were in 2019, then unfortunately the PPP would not be eligible for you. And I certainly understand, having lived here through all that the territory is still recovering from the hurricanes, Maria and Irma. But if you cannot find a 2019 quarter that is at least 25% higher than a 2020 quarter, then unfortunately there's just little that can be done.
Thank you. Another question came in. What is the period for use of the loan under the second PPP application? Does it commence from the loan approval date or from where the previous funds were exhausted?
It commences from when the loans hit your account. So you will not receive a PPP, a second draw PPP loan without at least some sort of assurance that you have either used all those funds in the previous one or will use all those funds. So there can be a case where you wouldn't necessarily have already used them, but that you will. And then you can receive those funds for the second round. And then the covered period is just what it is. So it's it's somewhere between 8 and 24 weeks. So essentially you have up to 24 weeks in that covered period to expend the second PPP loan amount, and that 24-week window starts when you receive those funds from the second PPP.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much, Wayne. And this may tie along with that, but someone asked earlier, if a recipient of the initial PPP loan was already granted forgiveness, will they still be eligible for consideration of forgiveness under the second request of the PPP?
I'm sorry, if the first PPP loan has already been forgiven, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, so if the first PPP loan has already been forgiven, that's fantastic. That's essentially a requirement for the second PPP loan, that it has shown that it either is at least was forgivable. So if you were forgiven, then you're ready to go.
Fantastic. And this may not be something you can answer, but maybe there is someone else in the audience that can answer. But the question is, Bank of St. Croix is currently not responding to emails or has any status. How can we get status of their PPP application?
I would call them and continue to bug them, or you can go in person, go into the Gallows Bay branch and just say, I'm not leaving until I get a response. But they are, I know they're receiving a high volume of calls, and they have a small number of staff. They are excellent locally in pulling together that information and sending up. But then the processing of the loans for Bank of St. Croix are done in Indiana. And in my experience, they have done a good job in pushing those loans through and responding. But if you're not getting a response, the only thing I can say is call and email. And if weeks and weeks go by and you still don't get anything, then you can reach out to me and we'll see if we can get a response out of them. But I would just try to keep working with them.
So definitely persistence is key here, but absolutely, I think the question, the additional question to that is, should there be concerns if it's been over a month? Is there any immediate concerns, Wayne?
I would not wait a month. So if you have submitted all the information to your lender and you have not heard anything for a couple of weeks, then you should be getting a response on what's going on. So I would certainly email, I would call, ask what additional information is needed, and go from there. And if over that course, of if you try for a couple of weeks and they're still not getting a response and you get to a month, then you can email me and we can try to figure out what's happening, and I'll try to get my contacts to get a response to you. But certainly don't email me if you just don't get a response initially. Try to get that response first.
Fantastic. So it looks like we don't have any more questions just yet in the chat. Perhaps we have some questions on Facebook. All right, so nothing on Facebook either. So I guess going once, going twice. We would like to end with just one more slide. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty, so we do want to thank Mr. Hellisland today for participating in VIEDA's Wednesday webinars on the Economic Aid Act Overview and PPP Relaunch. And so I'm sure many of you have noticed by now that between SBC, VIEDA, and UBI Cell, we have been pumping out tons of webinars to support small businesses during this time. If you haven't heard, every Tuesday at 10 a.m., the Small Business Development Center does host their weekly webinars, as well as launched a Wednesday afternoons 2 o'clock. So I do see that we have a hand raised. Before we close that out, by all means, Mr. Auguste, I hope I said that correctly.
Yes, closing up, thank you. Of course, I've been on the road, I've been at a doctor's appointment, so I'm missing a good portion of this. But I do have a question, because I did send in a question earlier, which you guys answered. So this is just a follow-up to it. So I'm assuming that if you were not in business in 2019, you are disqualified from the PPP loan.
No, not necessarily. So the vast majority of business owners applying for PPP were already in business. You have to have been in business prior to February 15th of 2020. So if you were not in business in 2019, but started your business, let's say early January, and you had a month or so, then it is eligible to apply, and you can use that small window prior to February 15th to make a determination on a loan amount for you. But that would be it. If you started your business after February, then you cannot apply. February 2020, then you cannot apply.
Mr. Auguste, any follow-up questions?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. So my question is then, you started in January and you got, of course, a portion of February. So, but you don't have 2019, so there's no comparison to be made.
Right.
How does the bank qualify you for the loan, since they are requiring 2019?
Right. So they will look at, that's more of a special circumstance. So in most, it's 2019, 2020. But if you are, so did you not receive let me say this, you did not receive a PPP loan initially, correct?
I received one initially. And fortunately, the bank worked with me, because I told them in 2019, I was in hurricane recovery mode.
Right.
So
right.
I really wasn't making much money compared to what I made previous to the hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
So I told them in 2020, my income started to increase. I started getting back my contracts. And so the cash flow was there. But to compare it to 2019 will really be an injustice to me. And I'm kind of seeing myself in that same situation. With 2019, I was X amount of percentage down. But then in 2020, business did start back, which I made clear. But guess what? There were a few quarters we were still greatly affected by COVID.
Right. So you were technically in business in 2019. You just were not making very much money, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's similar to a question I was asked earlier. I know a lot of businesses here in the territory were suffering still from the effects of the hurricanes and other things that were happening. But there's just very little that can be done. If your 2020 revenues are better than they were in 2019, even if it was under the pandemic, the view of the congressional officials that put this together is like, consider yourself lucky. This does not apply for you. And unfortunately, there's not an opportunity to receive a PPP loan if you are making more money in 2020 than you were in 19.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry it's not better news, but no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Guse, and as well, Mr. Huddleston. So again, just for folks who missed it in the beginning, to get the resources for this webinar, including the slide deck presentation, the recording live, you can get that at www.usvieda.org/webinars. I'm going to go ahead and place that in the chat as well. And note that we do have 2 upcoming webinars next week. We're continuing with our 4-month e-marketing training course every other Tuesday. And so next week's course is Social Media Content Creation and Management Part 2 on February 23rd from 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. And then our Part 2 for the Cost Pricing Forum on entrepreneurship training will be on Wednesday, February 24th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. And you can register for both of those as well as get the recordings for today's webinar, again, at www.usvieda.org/webinars. And I just want to thank everyone once again for joining the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority's Wednesday webinars, and of course to our partner this morning, Mr. Huddleston from the Small Business Administration, SBA, USVI, and Puerto Rico Division. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Chanel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.